Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and Tommy Christopher is with us. He is the White House correspondent and White House reporter, media correspondent and White House reporter with Mediaite.com. And, excuse me while I get my ear here working. Mediaite.com is the website. Tommy, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for having me, Tom.
So you did a story about a 7-year-old boy suspended for a pencil gun. Tell me about this.
Yeah, his name was Christopher Marshall, and he was suspended for 2 days because he pointed a pencil at a classmate and made a machine gun noise.
And your take on that?
Well, I mean, obviously, I think that it's an overreaction to suspend the kid for 2 days. What I really thought was ridiculous was that they got a quote from the school administrator who said that they were suspending him on the basis of their zero tolerance policy on weapons, saying that a pencil can be a weapon if it's pointed in a threatening manner and you make gun noises. So I just thought it was silly. I mean, you can't, a pencil doesn't become a threatening weapon because you make a noise with it.
Do you know if there was any, background to this? I mean, if this child had been in trouble, repeatedly for very aggressive behavior, and this just kind of was a point where they had an excuse, a line that he had crossed that they could use?
No, they said he had a clean record, and then he stopped as soon as they asked him to. And the other thing I found really weird, which they didn't really explain at all, is that they also suspended the other kid, the kid that got imaginarily shot.
Right.
That hardly seems fair.
Yeah.
I think what's at work here is that, you have kids, you've dealt with school administrators, and, they can be very unimaginative when it comes to dealing with problems. They rather just, they take what they think is the path of least resistance. They don't want to treat anybody as special, treat everybody the same, and just sort of, I don't know how they hope to get away with this without anybody objecting. That was very silly.
Yeah, it does seem very silly, and I do know about school administrators. I've been one actually, and I share your and you and I are both progressives, and this seems like the kind of thing that conservatives would be yelling about. Oh, it must be unionized teachers or something like that.
I don't know. I expected to hear more about it, but I don't know. Maybe we found something that everybody can agree on.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, every now and then somebody just goes too far in whatever direction, and crazy things happen. But does this, do you think, reflect, or maybe we shouldn't even put it onto this story, but in general, and I mean, you're the White House reporter there. You check that out. You've got your finger on the pulse of America, as it were, in many regards, as a reporter.
Try.
Do you think that the gun, I'm reluctant to use the word hysteria, all of the energy that's being put into, for example, background checks, folks on the right are like, you guys are being hysterical. You guys, this is, everything's fine. Chill out. Wayne La Petite, he says, just we don't need no stinking background check. Are we overreacting? I mean, back when somebody called in yesterday and they said, when Reagan was shot, it was a no-brainer to pass the Brady bill or some variation on it, and assault weapons bans, and you shoot a Republican and holy cow. But when 20 kids are murdered in Newtown, and there have been hundreds since then, it's not a Republican, or maybe a few of them are actually. But what's your sense of how America is dealing with this?
No, well, I don't think that. I do think that this story sort of feeds into the idea that maybe there's like a hysterical overreaction going on, which is unfortunate because I don't think that there's been an overreaction. I think the thing that people miss out on is that they keep saying things like that there are other things that kill people more frequently, et cetera. But the reason that this is not an overreaction is that these are preventable deaths. There are things we are so far from doing. Not just the most that we can to prevent deaths, but anything at all to prevent deaths. No, of course it's not an overreaction. I mean, this background check bill, without background checks, what we're saying is not just a possible criminal, like a convicted murderer can now get purchase a weapon without a background check.
Right, somebody who has a background of beating their wives or assaulting people, or yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think that there's any way to characterize any of this as an overreaction, and I do think that. I've also been writing. I wrote an article this afternoon about another 2-year-old who shot and killed himself in Texas last night.
Accidentally.
Yes. And there have been, Rachel Maddow talked about this last night. Like, are we just noticing this, or is this really an epidemic? But I mean, since April, there have been something like 20 of these shootings where the children were the shooters themselves, either shooting other children or themselves. There was one, it was a 2-year-old girl who shot her mother in the stomach, unintentionally.
Right.
And so I feel like,
well, the NRA line is, guns don't kill people. Kill people. But how can, which assumes a certain level of intent and malice. When you're talking about a 5-year-old killing their 2-year-old sister, or a 2-year-old accidentally shooting their mom, I mean, that becomes a nonsensical statement, does it not?
Well, yeah, and then here's an amazing thing I found out this week that I did not know, and you might not know either. But, the NRA pays lip service to being about gun safety, and they have a brochure that tells parents to keep their guns secure. Mm-hmm. And yet they also tell their members, even the parents, not to lock up their guns because that'll make them sitting ducks in a home invasion. So they're actually telling parents not to lock their guns up, even as they're sort of covering their own asses by saying, yeah, sure, you should lock your guns up.
Wow.
And I think that the lesson to be taken from the most recent, like I said, there's been a good 20 or so of these, of kids just getting guns and shooting themselves or other people, is that, people need to be, we don't need a law for this. People need to be more aware of how they're storing their guns,
right.
And not be overconfident. I mean, I'm sure there are cases where people are normally very vigilant, and they're just a momentary lapse, and it can be tragic. And if the media would report on it more, then it might happen less.
Yeah, maybe the gun-safe business is what we should be encouraging rather than the weapons manufacturing business. I'm curious, Kelly Ayotte, you've covered the political beat here. Kelly Ayotte, the new Republican senator from New Hampshire, is taking a lot of heat for having voted against background checks, against closing the gun show loophole on background checks. And the NRA, I believe, somebody anyway, is funding an ad in which people who represent themselves as average New Hampshire, housewives are saying, "Oh, we like Kelly Ayotte. She's standing up for the what's good and right." Turns out that it's like former staffers of hers and the head of the Republican Party in New Hampshire, pretending to be average people. Is she going to make it through this? Are the others going to make it through this? Is there going to be a revote? We just have a minute here, Tommy.
Yeah, I think that there's been a massive amount of polling showing that this vote is splitting people. And I think that if there is a revote, they weren't that, what was it, 54 to 46?
Right.
I think that, all they really need are 2 Republicans, and I think the 4 Democrats who voted no will switch. I mean, I think that if they knew that they could make 60, they would have made that yet. They would have voted for it. So, yeah, I think if it gets a revote, there's a good chance it passes. Yeah,
and so now Harry Reid is saying, you want to revote on the gun thing? First, you got to talk about immigration. This is an interesting little bit of political theater. Tommy Christopher, the media correspondent, White House reporter for Mediaite.com, Mediaite.com. Tommy, thanks for dropping by.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
Always nice talking with you. 16 minutes past the hour. We'll be back.